Meet Emily Carter. At 28, she stands behind the worn countertop of a bustling suburban supermarket in Queens, scanning groceries and bagging produce with a practiced efficiency. Her uniform navy blue polo shirt and black slacks feels like armor protecting her from the jibes she's grown accustomed to. Emily's parents, Richard and Diane, and her older brother Michael, often tease her about holding the cash drawer instead of chasing a respectable career. To them, her job is little more than pocketing nickels and watching people shop. Yet every day, Emily arrives before dawn, determined to make the most of her ordinary routine. The late afternoon bell rings and customers drift in families stocking up for dinner, elderly neighbors on steady pensions, teenagers grabbing snacks for after-school hangs. Amid the beeps and chatter, Emily offers each person a kind word. A child who hovers shyly by the candy aisle receives an encouraging smile. An elderly man carrying too many cans is gently assisted. These small gestures fuel her pride in her work. But they also spark something deeper. The belief that dignity isn't defined by a title, but by the impact one makes no matter how small. That evening, the Carters gather at Mom and Dad's house for a celebratory dinner. Michael has just been promoted to vice president at his investment firm. The dining room shimmers under crystal chandeliers. The aroma of roasted lamb mingles with the clink of wine glasses. Emily slips through the doorway in a modest navy dress. Her family greets her with polite smiles, but the congratulations flow straight to Michael. So Emily Richard says, carving the lamb, when are you going to climb the corporate ladder yourself? You know you could do so much more than just scanning barcodes. Diane nods sympathetically. Maybe you'll go back to school. An MBA, perhaps? Then you could be a manager somewhere, not just a cashier. Emily's heart tightens. She forces a semblance of humor. Oh, you know me. I like being around people. Besides, I'm saving up for night classes. Michael, dressed in a crisp suit, raises his glass. Here's to family success, he toasts. The others echo him. Emily clinks her glass lightly, feeling as if she's on the fringe of a celebration that isn't hers. Later that night, in the quiet of her small Brooklyn apartment, Emily pulls out a worn leather journal. Over the past 2 years, she's filled its pages with notes on community issues, overcrowded public schools, the cost of groceries in underserved neighborhoods, the challenges faced by hourly workers without benefits. Her handwriting grows more confident with each entry, punctuated by ideas for meetings and articles she'd like to write. I'm not just a cashier, she mutters to herself. I see people struggling every day. I can't let them down. Beneath her resolve lies a seed of rebellion, a promise that she won't be defined by others' expectations. Saturday afternoon sunlight slants through the stained glass windows of a modest community center on East 89th Street. Emily's voice rings out as she leads a workshop on empowering everyday workers. 17 participants, grocery clerks, janitors, bus drivers, lean forward in folding chairs. Emily shares strategies for organizing a grassroots campaign to lobby the city council for better minimum wage protections and affordable healthcare options. Her humility and passion captivate the room. Afterward, Harold Nguyen, a 45-year-old bus driver, approaches her. Emily, I never thought I could call a council member, let alone schedule a meeting. But you showed us how. He pauses, eyes bright. Thank you. Emily smiles, thinking back to the night her brother laughed at her little workshop. She breathes deep, energized by the faces before her, each one a testament to resilience. By summer's end, Emily has become a familiar figure at local events, budget hearings, at City Hall press conferences, calling for unionization rights, open mics, where she shares poignant stories of laborers struggling to pay rent. A small local newspaper picks up her story, Cashier-turned-advocate rallies Queens workers. The article features her earnest eyes and quick laugh. Her family sees the mention. Michael teases her with a text, "Nice piece, Cassie sales girl. Don't forget us little people when you're famous." Emily bites back a smile. The old sting of condescension lingers, but it's softened by pride. 2 years later, Emily stands on a rickety podium in Jackson Heights, addressing a crowd of neighbors and volunteers. On either side, banners read, "Elect Emily Carter for New York City Council." Behind her, her campaign team buzzes college interns, union reps, and fellow grocery clerks who believe in her vision. She opens with a story about the widow who forgave a late fee at checkout, the single father who relied on her advice to navigate food stamps, and the nurse who found comfort in her kindness after a grueling night shift. The audience is rapt. When she mentions her first paycheck and the lessons learned at the register, a cheer rises up. Emily's voice crescendos. This campaign isn't about paying lip service. It's about paying respect to every worker in this city. When we value each other's labor, we build stronger communities. That evening, Emily returns home to find a postcard from her parents. "Congratulations on your campaign kickoff. We're proud. Keep up the good work." It's the first genuine note of support she's ever received from them. She pins it above her desk alongside clippings from endorsements by the teachers' union and a prominent community newspaper. On election night, the returns come in slowly. Emily and her team huddle around a flickering laptop in a cramped campaign office. District after district reports her opponents hold slim leads. Anxiety crackles in the air. Her heart pounds as the final precinct is called. A sudden ping. Emily's campaign manager, Sarah, leans forward, eyes widening. "Emily, you did it!" There's a collective gasp, followed by erupting cheers. Emily feels tears prick her eyes as she absorbs the news she has won. Minutes later, her phone buzzes. It's a video call from Michael. He appears on screen smiling sheepishly. "Sis, I owe you an apology." He hesitates. "You're going to be City Council Member Carter. That's big." Emily swallows the lump in her throat, glances at the familiar postcard, then back at her brother. The journey from her supermarket lane to the steps of City Hall has just begun, and with it, the reckoning she's long awaited. The weeks following Emily Carter's upset win for New York City Council felt like swimming through headlines and handshakes. Every morning she woke before dawn, this time not to stock shelves, but to sift through constituent emails, draft policy memos, and prepare remarks for committee hearings. Even so, the echoes of beeping cash registers and the soft "thank you, ma'am" from customers never left her, reminding her that every decision she made now carried the weight of real lives. 6 months into her term, a crisis flared. A proposed reduction in funding for city food pantries threatened the programs that had long sustained low-income families. Emily rallied her fellow council members, weaving personal stories she'd collected as a cashier like Mrs. Lopez, the single mother who sometimes skipped meals so her children could eat, into impassioned floor speeches. Late nights found her poring over budget spreadsheets, tracing each dollar until she mapped out a compromise that restored the cuts, plus a modest increase in staff wages. Her success earned praise in the local press and wary congratulations from political insiders. "Good work, Councilmember Carter," said one veteran reporter. "You've got heart and the data to back it up." But with newfound visibility came scrutiny. Opponents grumbled that her background was too narrow, that a cashier-turned-councilwoman lacked the gravitas for higher office. Emily filed the jabs away alongside her grocery notes, proof that her critics still saw her through the lens of a barcode scanner. When the next election cycle rolled around, her campaign slogan, "From register to representation," resonated across the boroughs. Her team, now bolstered by seasoned strategists and activists, launched door-to-door canvassing fundraisers in converted warehouse lofts and town halls in every neighborhood from Astoria to the Bronx. At each event, Emily stood barefoot on creaky floors, speaking directly to the people who understood her journey best. By the end of Election Day, she claimed a seat in the New York State Senate, Albany, New York. Home to marble halls, echoing oratory, and a brooding statue of Theodore Roosevelt was Emma's new frontier. She arrived in January, the wind biting through her overcoat as she stepped off the train. Inside the Senate chamber, seasoned legislators eyed her with polite curiosity. They'd heard of the cashier-turned-advocate, but now she wore tailored suits and delivered policy briefs on everything from urban housing to renewable energy. Her first bill, co-sponsored with a senior senator from Buffalo, proposed tax credits for small businesses that provided paid sick leave. Emily's argument was simple: no worker should choose between treating a sick child and keeping their job. She cited data on reduced turnover and increased productivity, but her core message was human. "I've seen a mother faint at my checkout line, worried she'd lose hours if she left her post to care for her daughter's fever. We can do better." The bill passed by a slim margin, enough to prove her effectiveness, but also a reminder that big wins come from coalition building and compromise. Back home, her family noted her growing influence. Richard sent a congratulatory gift, a framed photograph of her at her first swearing-in ceremony. Michael, now a VP at his firm, emailed, "Keep killing it, sis." Next stop, Washington. Diane called less often, but when she did, her voice carried a quiet pride, undiminished by past snipes. When a New York congressional seat opened in a special election, Emily weighed the risks. A loss could stall her momentum. A win would launch her onto the national stage she'd once only observed from the newsstand at the supermarket. On a blustery autumn evening, she announced her candidacy in a packed church basement in Queens. The room pulsed with energy, volunteers clad in orange Carter for Congress shirts, union leaders, and neighbors clutching homemade signs. Her platform blended the local with the national universal pre-K affordable health care tied to employment, and a new federal initiative to modernize the country's food assistance programs. She spoke of the pandemic's lessons the workers deemed essential, yet left without hazard pay, and urged Washington to treat labor with the same respect we demand of each other. As the primary rolled on, negative ads surfaced, Emily Carter unqualified. They filmed her stocking shelves out of context, insinuating that a grocery clerk couldn't navigate complex bills. She countered with town halls and viral social media clips, a 30-second spot showing her meeting with a construction worker injured on the job, promising to legislate stricter safety standards. By spring, she claimed the primary with 58% of the vote. In November, she won her district handily. 2 years later, Emily stood backstage at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Delegates hummed with anticipation as her name threaded through conversations, the rising star from Queens, the policymaker with both data chops and heart. Backstage, veteran members whispered predictions, some skeptical, others awed by her rapid ascent. Emily's pulse thundered as she watched highlights of her career flicker on a colossal screen: the community center with its stained glass windows, the city hall budget hearing the Senate chamber's marble floors, and a montage of late-night volunteer phone banks. When she walked onto the stage, the arena erupted. "Fellow Americans," she began, her voice booming through stadium speakers. "I'm Emily Carter, a former supermarket cashier, a public servant, and your candidate for Vice President of the United States." The cheers cascaded like a tidal wave. She wove her life's tapestry into her speech: the bagged groceries that taught her empathy, the family dinners that taught her resolve, and the hours spent drafting legislation that taught her perseverance. At the close, she quoted her favorite line from Maya Angelou: "My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style." In January 20th, of course, Emily Carter took her place on the west front of the Capitol. By her side stood her parents and Michael, faces illuminated by the morning sun. As she raised her right hand, Diane clutched Richard's arm. Michael dabbed at his eyes. The Chief Justice's words echoed, "I do solemnly swear." When Emily placed her hand on the Bible, she stole a glance at her family. No longer was she the cashier. She was the nation's second highest official, a living rebuke to that dismissive question at her brother's promotion dinner. Why climb the ladder if you're only going to work the cash register? After the oath, Emily turned to them and whispered, "We did this together." The crowd roared, but her gaze stayed fixed on her parents. In their eyes, she saw wonder, pride, and a trace of regret. Not for what they had said, but for underestimating her. She offered her arm to her mother, and they walked down the Capitol steps side by side. Later that evening, at the inaugural reception, Emily stood before a framed photograph of her in her supermarket uniform, placed on a table alongside images from every milestone of her journey. Guests paused to read the caption Emily Carter, from scanning to statesmanship. It bore witness to a truth she'd always known: dignity isn't given, it's earned. And no matter the title, every life holds the power to change the world. Story 2. My name is David Johnson. I'm 26, and I am not a hero, just a dad whose entire world got ripped apart by my wife's own mother. Sitting here now in our new house outside Austin, Texas, it still feels surreal to say that. Let me take you back to exactly how it all began, because it's important you hear every detail, the good, the bad, and the moments when I thought I'd lose my mind. It started almost a year ago. Anna and I had just celebrated our son Mateo's first month, and we were floating on that new baby high. You know, I worked as a financial analyst at this hot little tech startup downtown, crunching numbers for renewable energy investors. Anna, she's 25 and teaches pre-K at the neighborhood school. She was glowing. Babies just bring out that kind of light in you. We'd moved into this cozy 3-bedroom in East Austin, traded our cramped Seattle apartment for wide porches and front yard barbecues. The whole community was friendly. We'd already met half the neighbors. Life felt possible. Then came the first DCF alert. In Texas, they call it Child Protective Services, CPS. One afternoon, I was knee-deep in a quarterly report when Anna called me. Her voice sounded funny, like she was trying to keep it from cracking. "David, CPS is at our door." I froze. "What? Why?" She didn't answer right away, just handed the phone to the woman from CPS. Imagine that some stranger talking to you like she already knows you're guilty. She rattled off allegations. "We've received reports of neglect, failure to thrive, possible substance misuse by the mother." All completely untrue. I remember my throat closing up. "You can't be serious," I said. But she was. She said they'd need to take Mateo into temporary protective custody. My own kid for his safety. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Anna and I looked at each other through a blur of fear and disbelief. We had medical records from Dr. Roth. He'd seen Mateo 2 weeks earlier, said he was healthy, active, meeting every milestone. We had photos, videos, charts. But none of it mattered. CPS did what CPS does. They came in clipboard in hand, glancing sideways at the pile of baby blankets and the half-eaten avocado toast on the counter. They barely looked at our paperwork. The only thing they cared about was that someone who had no clue about our life had called them. That someone was my mother-in-law, Susan Lee. She's 48, a former DCF specialist in Houston, moved here to be closer to Anna after she got married. In her mind, her decades at the agency gave her some moral high ground. I still can't figure out why she lied to CPS 3 times in 2 weeks, each time inflating the danger, until CPS showed up armed with a court order. The court order was weirdly written, like it had her notes tacked right into it. Family history of emotional instability. Parents too young to make sound decisions. None of it had any basis in fact, but in that moment, the judge's signature told the CPS worker they could take Mateo. They put him with his grandparents. In their car, on our street, the last time we saw him, a baby sock pinned to the summons taped on our front door, stained with a little spit up, a silent challenge they dared us to get him back. It became our symbol of everything twisted about that day. That sock pinned to official paper, it was like they'd weaponized our love for him. In the days that followed, Anna fell apart. She'd wake up in the nursery at 3 a.m, clutching baby clothes, crying into them until dawn. I hardly recognized her. I wanted to rage, to kick down doors, to do anything, risk everything to bring our son home. But the law moves slow, and there were hearings, paperwork, a public defender who barely glanced at our evidence. I spent nights researching Texas family law blogs, reading every transcript I could find. I called my best friend Mark, who dropped everything to help me. He set up a YouTube channel, no frills, just a phone camera, a ring light, and raw footage of me telling our story. Document everything he said. Make them see us as human, not some abstract case number. So I filmed me in the empty nursery, Anna's trembling hands holding his stuffed elephant, me recounting every detail on camera with as much calm as I could muster. But nothing changed. Every hearing felt like déjà vu. Susan Lee in a dark suit playing concerned grandma, tears glossing her eyes as she talked about protecting her grandson. And me looking like a man on the brink, sweating through my shirt collars, trying to prove that our son's slow weight gain was because of a subtle milk protein allergy. Something Dr. Martinez, our new pediatrician here in Texas, finally caught after we switched doctors. He's reacting to standard formula, she told us, her brow furrowed. This is why he's always fussy, why he didn't gain as much weight. But CPS refused to revisit the medical record until I shoved the allergy report in the judge's face like a gauntlet. Still, the case dragged on. I started testing my limits. I'd show up at CPS with camera crew in tow, ask blunt questions. Why did you ignore Dr. Roth's notes? Why did you side with someone who gave you zero first-hand knowledge? The CPS staffer. Officer Jenkins looked cornered, took notes, avoided eye contact. In parallel, Mark got Emily Carter, a civil rights attorney, to blitz our inbox. Letters to the Texas Attorney General, complaints to the state bar about Susan Lee's conflicts of interest. The pressure built. All the while, Anna found strength she didn't know she had. She wrote a letter to Mateo, a letter full of promise, apologies, and fierce love, and tucked it inside a wooden music box carved with a crown. That music box became her secret weapon. Whenever she felt hopeless, she'd wind it, let the lullaby play, and remember why she was fighting. It became our second symbol. Tiny, delicate, but unbreakable, just like her. By the end of week 4, we'd compiled a stack of evidence so thick it rivaled a small novel CPS hotline logs showing Susan Lee's 3 calls, timestamps, summaries. Security camera clips of Susan pacing outside our house. Emails from neighbors attesting to our responsible parenting. Dr. Martinez's lab reports. And on the 11th floor of the Travis County Courthouse, I finally got to lay it all out. As I spoke, Anna stood behind me, the music box in her hand, tears threatening, but held back by sheer will. When I finished, the courtroom was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. And then something shifted. The judge paused, opened the file, his brows knitting. He looked at me, and for a brief second, I saw concern. Then he announced, I am ordering temporary placement of the child back to his parents pending further review. That moment, walking out of that courtroom with Mateo in my arms, should have been pure relief. But it was laced with fear of retaliation, fear of Susan Lee's next move. We knew she wouldn't give up, and I realized the fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. As we drove home, Anna and I clasped hands across the car seat. I glanced in the rearview mirror at Mateo, eyes wide, clutching the wooden music box. The baby sock pinned to our door still haunted me, proof that fear can be manufactured, that a single person who knows the system can bend it to their will. But we had our symbols back, now the music box crowned with hope. Anna's letter, and a renewed conviction that no one but us could parent our son. We pulled into our driveway, hearts pounding. The front door stood closed, the sock gone, but on the porch sat an envelope addressed to the Johnson family. I reached for it, my breath catching. Inside was a single page, "This isn't over. Next time I win." No signature, just a threat scrawled in familiar handwriting. And in that instant, I knew there was no turning back. Our fight for Mateo's future would redefine every part of our lives. The next chapter would demand even more courage, even riskier moves. Because for a family betrayed by its own blood, the only way forward is to face the darkness head-on and refuse to let it win. I wish I could say that once we had Mateo back, things calmed down, that we slipped into some peaceful routine and the worst was behind us. But that would be a lie. In fact, the moment the courthouse doors swung shut behind us, Anna and I both felt it in our bones. Susan Lee was gearing up for round 2. It was like the air crackled with tension the second we stepped into the Texas heat. And even though I was holding my son in my arms, safe for now, I realized the real fight was only just beginning. We arrived home to a silent house. It was almost midday, but the front porch light was still off and the windows were dark. My heart sank when I saw the envelope on the welcome mat, a single sheet of paper, but the message inside carried all the weight of 1,000 threats. You got lucky this time. Don't expect me to play fair? No signature, but we both knew the handwriting. It was a gauntlet thrown down in the sun. I tucked it into my pocket, crumpled it, then smoothed it out and flattened it on the kitchen counter right next to the baby sock we had rescued from our old front door. I stared at that sock like it was a relic from another life, a symbol of everything we had endured. Then I looked over at Anna, who was watching me with that look I've come to recognize as determination. She tightened her grip on the wooden music box, that little crown carved on top, and without a word, wound it up. Its soft lullaby filled the room, and for a moment, everything felt possible again. We knew we couldn't just sit back and wait for the next strike. Our son, our family needed us to be proactive. So that afternoon, we made a decision we were going on the offensive. I called Mark and laid out a new plan, one that involved more than just posting court transcripts and reaction videos. We need to hit them where it hurts, I told him. We need public opinion. We need to turn their own weapon, their own credibility, against them. Mark Ever, the strategist, proposed a live-streamed town hall. Let's get the neighbors involved. Let's show the community that CPS can be manipulated by insider influence and that anyone's family could face the same nightmare. We set it up for Friday evening at our local community center, a simple room with folding chairs and a podium, but we plastered flyers on every church bulletin, every coffee shop corkboard, every parent-teacher newsletter we could get our hands on. Over the next 2 days, Anna and I prepared. Anna wrote her testimony on note cards, each one a bullet point about the injustice we'd suffered, the medical details of Mateo's allergy, the documentation proving how Susan Lee had used her DCF connections to weaponize the system. I dug up every email, every CPS hotline log, every snippet of video footage where we caught Susan pacing outside our house at dawn, phone pressed to her ear. Each piece was a thread in the tapestry of our story, and we were determined to weave it in a way that no one could look away. I set up Mark's camera gear in our backyard ring lights mics, a backdrop that said "One family's fight for justice" so we could run through each segment. We practiced until our voices were hoarse and our eyes were bloodshot from reading the same words over and over, but we needed to sound natural, unfiltered, honest. Friday night arrived humid as only an Austin summer night can be, and the community center was packed. I'd never seen so many faces from our neighborhood, some friendly, some curious, some skeptical. I spotted Mrs. Caldwell from down the street, who always waved at us when we drove by. I saw Antonio and Marisol, the young couple who had a newborn a week after Mateo was born. I even saw 1 or 2 CPS employees in the back row taking notes. My palms sweated as Anna stepped up to the podium first. She was radiant in a simple sundress, hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, the music box dangling from her wrist like a talisman. She told her story. Her voice trembled at first, but with each word it grew stronger, steadier. I watched her eyes flick to mine, and I knew she was drawing power from our shared pain. She described the terror of losing her son, the weeks of empty arms and haunted nights, the medical revelations that should have freed us earlier, and the feeling of betrayal when the system she once trusted turned its back on her. When she finished, the room was quiet for a heartbeat, and then the applause was thunderous. Next, it was my turn. I cleared my throat, lifted the stack of documents in one hand, and started. I laid out the timeline: the first CPS call instigated by Susan Lee's initial complaint, the second call with escalated allegations, the third with outright lies about substance use. I read excerpts from her emails, texts where she boasted about knowing exactly how to push their buttons. I showed the allergy report from Dr. Martinez with the lab technician's notes, the date stamped right between Susan's second and third calls. As I spoke, I tapped the sock pinned beneath the glass on the table, a silent reminder that a single piece of cotton had once been enough to break our family. I could see nods around the room, furrowed brows, whispers of, "That's terrible. I can't believe it." Then I paused and asked, if someone like Susan, someone with decades of experience inside the system, can abuse it so easily, what's stopping it from happening to your family or your neighbor or you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. That's when the twist hit. One of the CPS employees in the back stood up and said, "I'm Officer Jenkins. I was on the case. And I was ordered not to look at the Roth records to defer to Ms. Lee's professional judgment. But I kept silent because I thought it was just procedure." He hesitated, then added, eyes downcast, "I regret not speaking up sooner." The room exploded with murmurs and shouts. He handed me a folder, internal emails from CPS headquarters, instructing field agents to prioritize reports from former employees. The proof was there in black and white. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might burst out of my chest. I looked at Anna, whose eyes were bright with tears and triumph, and then back at the crowd. That, I said, voice cracking, is why we're here. Because silence and obedience nearly cost me my son. The next few minutes were a blur, citizens voicing outraged, neighbors offering to testify, local reporters raising their hands. By the time we left, our YouTube live stream had thousands of views, and the story was already trending on local news sites. We had ignited a spark that night, but I knew sparks can die out if not fanned. We needed more legal action, media pressure, political allies. Susan Lee and her enablers would respond, no doubt, with denials and lawsuits of their own. But for the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. We weren't nameless victims, we were a movement. And I felt something inside me I hadn't felt in months: purpose. On the drive home, we passed the old neighborhood where the house still stood, the porch light off the windows dark. I glanced at Anna in the passenger seat. She was scrolling through replies on her phone, reading messages of solidarity from all over Texas. I reached out and took her hand, and she squeezed it tight, her wedding ring gleaming in the dashboard light. I thought of the baby sock and the music box, our symbols of loss and hope intertwined. I realized those symbols had done their job. They had anchored our story, given it weight, given us courage. And as we pulled into our driveway, the porch light blinked on for the first time since the court hearing. It was automatic part of a program we'd set up to welcome us home. I opened the door, and there on the mat was another envelope, thicker this time, a news clipping taped to it. Local family exposes CPS corruption movement grows. Inside was a handwritten note, "You inspire me. Keep fighting." No signature again, but I didn't need one. The message was clear: we were not alone. I sat on the porch with Anna and Mateo nestled between us, the night breeze soft against our skin. Above, the stars were bright, and in that moment, I believed, truly believed, that we could win. But as I looked down at the second envelope in my lap, I noticed its shadow stretched long across the porch boards, dark and silent. And in that shadow, I felt a chill, knowing Susan Lee would retaliate, and that our next move would have to be bolder, riskier, perhaps even dangerous. I swallowed hard, glanced at the envelope, then looked at Anna. "They're not done," I said quietly. She nodded. "Then neither are we." And with that, the real battle for our family's future had only just begun. The weeks after our town hall victory felt like a whirlwind. I kept replaying Officer Jenkins's confession and the flood of community support in my mind, like it was the only anchor holding me together. I went back to work, but the office felt different. Every spreadsheet, every forecast, they all seemed trivial compared to what I'd experienced. And yet, I had to keep the hustle going. Financial models wouldn't crunch themselves, and my boss expected results. But in every meeting, I found my mind drifting back to home, to Anna winding that wooden music box, once a simple lullaby, now a battle hymn, to the baby sock, that pathetic scrap of fabric that had become a symbol of twisted power, and to the faces of neighbors who whispered thank you or stay strong as I walked by. One afternoon, I got a call from Emily Carter, our civil rights attorney. "David," she said, voice clipped and urgent, "we've got a problem." My chest tightened. "What is it?" "Susan Lee's lawyer has filed a motion for defamation against you, the community center, and Officer Jenkins. They're demanding retractions, apologies, and a hefty settlement." I sank into my chair. It was the sort of legal retaliation we'd anticipated, but hearing it made my stomach churn. A defamation suit. "After everything, they're calling this a smear campaign against CPS," she continued. "Even though you presented evidence in court, they're twisting it into false statements. I need you to start gathering our own lawsuit against Susan Lee and DCF for malicious prosecution, abuse of process, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We're going on a fence, but we have to do it right." I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of the next round. "Okay," I said, voice steady despite the dread knotting my gut. "Let's do it." That weekend, Anna and I converted our dining table into a war room. We spread out folders labeled Evidence, Witnesses, CPS Logs, and Media. I grabbed the sock, now carefully preserved in a glass display case, and placed it next to the music box on one corner of the table, as if they were two side tokens of our journey. One of fear, one of hope. Anna sat beside me with a laptop running through the timeline again. "We have to make sure every date lines up," she said. "Susan's lawyer will pick apart any discrepancy." I nodded, thinking of how precise we'd been so far. "Let's also compile statements from everyone who saw Susan outside our house that morning, neighbors, delivery drivers, the dog walker." She added those notes to the folder. Then I said, "We need more something that ties her directly to the court order." Anna looked up. "What about Linda, the assistant at CPS headquarters? I heard Susan called her personally." I frowned. "We need proof." Anna tapped her pen. "I'll subpoena her phone records." It was a risky move. Subpoenas can provoke countersuits, but it was one I believed in. We needed to nail every lie she told. By Monday morning, I'd arranged a meeting with Mark and Emily at a coffee shop near the courthouse. The place smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. Mark slid into the booth with 2 coffees and his camera bag slung over his shoulder. "How's it feel to be a legal gladiator?" he joked, handing me a cup. I managed a weak grin. Emily arrived moments later, briefcase in hand, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Good news first," she said, setting down a thick manila envelope. "CPS headquarters has agreed to hand over Linda's phone logs as part of discovery. We also have the power to deposit testimony from social media followers who witnessed your town hall. Their numbers are in the thousands." My pulse raced. "That's huge." Emily nodded. "We build this civil suit on 3 pillars. Susan Lee's abuse of her position, CPS's complicity, and the emotional harm you and Anna suffered. If we win, we'll not only force them to retract their case, but secure damages that will cover legal fees, moving costs, and then some." Mark tapped his fingers on the table. "And the video footage will go public. We'll live stream the depositions. Force them to face the community they betrayed." I took a sip of coffee and let the plan settle. It was ambitious, dangerous even, but it felt right. Let's get to work. After that meeting, the days blurred into a cycle of depositions, document requests, and late-night strategy calls. Every morning, I'd wake up with a new email notification CPS had produced another set of internal memos, or Susan Lee's lawyer had filed a motion to seal certain records, or the judge had set a hearing date. I felt trapped in a constant state of readiness like a soldier on the front lines. But I also felt something else, a deep well of resolve stirring inside me, fueled by love for my family and a burning conviction that no one should endure what we did. One afternoon, I received a text message from Anna Kidd's daycare director called. She said Susan Lee placed another welfare check with them. I closed my laptop, heart sinking. "Not again," I muttered. I called the daycare director, Lisa Nguyen, who sounded apologetic. "I'm so sorry, David," she said. But she insisted professional concern and all that. She threatened to report us for unqualified childcare providers. I had to verify our licenses. I clenched my fists. Thanks for handling it, Lisa. We appreciate you. After we hung up, I looked at the sock and music box. They sat together, silent witnesses. They're not letting up, are they? I said, voice low. Anna shook her head. They're scared. They know the lawsuit could expose everything. I exhaled. Good. Let them be scared. In the following days, I noticed something shifting in our community. Neighbors, once polite but distant, now greeted us with open warmth. Friends from the coffee shop offered legal referrals. People shared their own stories of bureaucratic nightmares, a teacher accused of misconduct based on a jealous co-worker's rumor, a single mom whose landlord used vague codes to justify evicting her baby and fatherless home. It was as if our fight had opened a floodgate of suppressed grievances. I realized then that our battle wasn't just personal. It was tapping into a deeper social tension, the fragility of trust between citizens and institutions. In America, we like to believe the system works, that checks and balances protect us. But when someone inside someone like Susan Lee turns the lever of power for personal revenge, the illusion shatters. That weekend, Mark set up a mini studio in our garage and recorded a series called Council of the Wronged. Each episode featured a different neighbor sharing their own run-in with CPS or another government agency. We branded it with the baby sock and the music box icon, a stark graphic. When the system turns on you, this is your story. We posted the episodes across social media, and the response was staggering. Messages poured in from across the state, even the country, praising our courage and vowing support. I felt proud and wary. This level of visibility painted a huge target on our backs, but hiding had never been an option. Then came the day of the big deposition. We'd subpoenaed Linda's phone records, and she was to testify under oath. I'd practiced what I'd say until my jaw ached. The morning of, I felt a hollow dread in my stomach, but I also felt an electric buzz. This was the moment of truth. At the courthouse, I watched from the gallery as Emily questioned Linda. Her voice was calm. Ms. Diaz, did you receive any calls from Ms. Lee on June 12th regarding the Johnson family? Linda's eyes darted, fingers twisting in her lap. Yes, she admitted. Emily pressed on. Were there any notes on your work log about concerns for the Johnsons prior to that date? Linda hesitated. No, she said, voice shaking. But I thought the call was routine. Emily leaned in. Routine or preferential treatment. Did Ms. Lee tell you to prioritize those calls? Linda's face crumpled. She said she had a personal connection to the case, that I should trust her judgment. There it was, an admission that the system had been skewed. The room buzzed with power. I felt tears burn my eyes, a mixture of vindication and rage. As Emily wrapped up the deposition, I caught sight of Susan Lee in the back row, her face pale, shoulders trembling. I felt a surge of triumph, but it was tempered by something darker, the knowledge that she would not go quietly into that good night. That night, Anna and I sat at our kitchen table again, the baby asleep in the next room. We reviewed the transcript on my laptop. Each admission, each hesitant yes from Linda was a dagger in Susan Lee's credibility. We marked sections in yellow for the lawsuit, and then Anna closed the laptop and said, "You know, when this is all over, I want to frame that transcript alongside that sock and the music box. A little shrine to what we survived." I smiled, the corners of my mouth lifting for the first time in days. I'd like that. We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Outside, the night was quiet, as if the world was holding its breath. And then I heard a soft knock on the front door. I opened it to find a UPS box on the porch, no return address. I carried it inside and set it on the counter. It was heavy, taped shut with industrial-strength packing tape. I grabbed a knife and sliced through it. Inside was a single item wrapped in brown paper, a CPS-issued folder with our case number scrawled on a sticky note. My heart pounded as I peeled back the paper. There inside was a photo of our son taken without our knowledge, smiling in his high chair at the daycare, the wooden music box on the table next to him. Someone had been watching. I felt the room spin, and Anna rushed over. "What is it?" she whispered. I held up the photo, voice barely a whisper. "They're watching us." The weight of that moment of knowing we had exposed their secrets only to become targets ourselves hit me like a freight train. And in that instant, I understood our next move would have to be not just bold, but shrewd. Because this fight had left the realm of paperwork and courtrooms and entered the world of personal vendettas. And when that happens, there are no rules to protect you. By the time I realized our lives had become a high-stakes chess match, there was no turning back. That photo on my kitchen counter, our son happily playing with his music box at daycare, felt less like a snapshot of innocence and more like a gauntlet thrown down in our faces. Whoever sent it wanted us to know they could watch every move. It rattled me, but only for a moment. I shoved it into a drawer alongside the baby sock and the court summons symbols of our trauma and our triumph. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and told Anna I need to see who's behind this. My voice sounded calmer than I felt, but inside my heart was pounding like a drum. She didn't argue. She just handed me a note she'd scribbled with addresses and phone numbers, tips from neighbors who'd seen a dark sedan circling our block, a man in a cap lurking near the daycare gate, someone who looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. She pressed the wooden music box into my hand. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said. I nodded, winding it tightly until it locked, a silent reminder of what we were fighting for. I drove to the daycare first, pulling onto the cracked asphalt lot as the sun dipped low. The building was quiet, the playground empty, but the security camera above the door still whirred like an eyeball in the sky. I slipped inside, flashing my ID to the receptionist before heading down the hall to Lisa's office. She looked up as I knocked, her face tightening. "David, I'm so sorry you had to get this again." I showed her the photo. "Someone's stalking us. They know his schedule." Lisa's brow furrowed. "I'll pull footage from yesterday afternoon. We have external cameras along the fence." "If someone was there," she tapped at her keyboard. "Here at 317, a black sedan parked out front. A guy got out, stood by the fence, watched the kids for 2 minutes, then left." I exhaled, feeling the weight of each detail pressing down. "Can you save that clip and let me know if he comes back?" Lisa nodded, and I left with a file on a flash drive and a creeping realization CPS and the Lees didn't just want to make us afraid, they wanted to drive us into hiding. Next, I went to the public library, a brick building that smelled like old books and promise. Inside, I found the free Wi-Fi terminal and logged onto Mark's private feed, the one he'd set up to share sensitive tips. Within minutes, messages popped up. "Heard from the dry cleaner guy in cap, asked about Johnson family's car last week. Neighbor saw same sedan near 5th and Guadalupe. Someone recognized the man, works for a private investigator firm, name's Carter." Carter. I'd come across the name in Susan Lee's emails she'd written once about hiring outside help when the CPS probe was going slow. My stomach churned. This was deeper than I thought. Someone with no official badge was collecting intel on us for Susan's revenge. I downloaded every tip, cross-referenced GPS data from my phone, and plotted his likely routes. By the time I left the library, I had an address written on a scrap of paper, a small office park on the east side of town. I pulled up to the strip mall as dusk settled, the neon signs flickering on. My palms were slick on the steering wheel, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. I tucked the music box into the glove compartment, almost as if its mere presence could keep me grounded. Then I stepped out and walked toward the glass door marked Carter Investigations. Inside, a receptionist looked up, then back to her phone. I cleared my throat. "I'm here to see Mr. Carter regarding a personal matter." She raised an eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment?" I hesitated, then decided to bluff. "It's urgent. I'd prefer not to schedule. It's about my family's safety." She studied me for a long moment, then picked up the phone. A few rings later, a tall man in a dark polo came out of an office, late 30s, neatly trimmed beard, eyes like cold steel. He paused when he saw me. "Mr. Johnson, I was expecting you." My heart lurched. "You were—" He gestured to a chair. "Please have a seat." My mind raced. Did Susan tip him off, or was he playing both sides? I sat, keeping my posture casual. I received this today. I slid the photo of Mateo across the desk. His eyes flicked down, then back at me. "Yes, I took that." He said it quietly, dispassionately. "I was hired by someone who wanted proof you were using your child as a prop in some smear campaign. They wanted dirt. That's all." I felt bile rise in my throat. "So, you just snap photos of a baby and leak them to terrorize his parents?" His jaw tightened. I was following ethical guidelines. No trespassing, no harassment beyond surveillance. "If you think that's a crime, take it up with my client." I slammed my hand on the desk. "Who is your client?" He sighed, looking weary. "I'm protected by confidentiality. But I will tell you this, you've poked a hornet's nest. Susan Lee controls more than just CPS contacts. You're walking on thin ice." My blood boiled. "Then tell me where she is right now." He looked at me, expression inscrutable. "I can't do that. But I can introduce you if you're willing to negotiate." The twist hit me like a punch. He wasn't my enemy. He was a broker. I realized that to survive, I might have to play his game. If I walked away now, Susan would tighten the screws. If I agreed, I risked exposing more of my family's pain. But standing there, staring at his impassive face, I felt a fierce resolve flare up. My son's safety was worth any risk. "I'll negotiate," I said, voice low. He nodded and reached into his pocket, pulling out a manila envelope. "You'll want these?" he said. Inside were documents, bank records, phone logs, travel receipts, proof that Susan and Robert Lee had been funneling money through shell companies to fund this operation. I stared at the numbers, each one an indictment of their betrayal. "This," I said, "is going public." "And if you cross me?" I trailed off. He met my gaze steadily. "You have my word. I'll only work with you when your needs align with mine." I tore the papers from the envelope and tucked them into my jacket. "Then let's align," I said. As I walked out into the night, a storm was rolling in. The sky darkened, distant thunder rumbled. I climbed into my car, heart pounding, pulling the sock and music box from their hiding place and placing them on the passenger seat. The trio of symbols, threat, hope, and now this dossier lay there like pieces on a battlefield. I knew that by allying with Carter, I was taking a gamble. I might find an ally or I might feed the beast. But I had decided I would never hide again. And as the first drops of rain began to patter on my windshield, I drove toward home into the unknown, ready for whatever came next. When I got home that night, the rain had soaked the porch and blurred the streetlights into a watercolor haze. I carried the dossier inside Susan Lee's hidden ledgers, her shell companies, the money trail straight into Carter investigations, and laid it out on our kitchen island next to the baby sock in its glass case and the wooden music box. Those three items, side by side, felt like a DNA strand of our entire journey: fear, hope, and now hard proof. Anna met me at the door, her eyes wide with equal parts relief and dread. "You made contact," she asked softly, clutching Mateo to her chest. I nodded. "I did. Carter wants to negotiate. He'll share more on one condition." My throat tightened. "He says he'll hand over the next phase of evidence if we publicly acknowledge his help." Anna exhaled slowly, setting Mateo's footed pajamas aside so our son could stretch in her arms. "We have to be careful. If we give him that credit, we risk looking like we used a mercenary rather than standing on our own." I touched her arm, feeling the weight of what we'd agreed to. "I know, but this is bigger than pride. It's the difference between exposing them or letting them bury us." The next morning, I drafted a press release to trusted media outlets, the local paper, the biggest online news site in Texas, a podcast that specialized in government accountability. I wrote it in my own voice, raw and honest. We are a family betrayed by the very system sworn to protect us. We've uncovered evidence that former CPS specialist Susan Lee abused her position to endanger her own grandson, and we've enlisted expert help to bring the truth to light. I signed it David and Anna Johnson with our small photo, Anna smiling in front of our house, Mateo on her hip. I knew the risk Carter would get public credit, and people would ask why we needed a private investigator at all. But I also knew that once the story broke, public pressure would be our shield. At noon, Mark and I walked into the offices of the Austin Chronicle dossier in hand. I remember the receptionist's raised eyebrows as we asked for the editor, and then the sharp click of her heels down the hall. When we sat in the small conference room, the editor, a woman named Carla, skimmed the pages without looking up. Then she leaned back, steepled her fingers, and asked, "You're really going through with this?" Her voice was calm but hard, like she'd seen too many brave souls crumble under pressure. I nodded, feeling my heart race. "Yes, we want to publish Wednesday morning. We're also handing you these documents unedited full access." She tapped a pen on the table. "You know what this means, right? CPS headquarters will come after you. Susan Lee's lawyer will file those defamation suits. Carter will want his fee." I reached across the table and placed the baby sock in front of her. That sock was pinned to our door when they took our son. That sock is why we're doing this. Her eyes flicked to the sock, and for a moment, I saw something like understanding or maybe pity cross her face. She closed the dossier, slid it into a secure folder, and said, "We'll run it." Walking back to my car, adrenaline pulsed through me. The sky was clearing, afternoon sun glinting off wet pavement. Anna met me in the driveway, earbuds and listening to Mark's live update about the leak, eyes bright with cautious hope. "They've confirmed it," she whispered. "They're running the story." I grabbed her hand and felt her warmth steady me. "Tonight," I said, "we prepare for impact." That evening, the story went live. Within minutes, notifications flooded my phone, alerts from news apps, mentions on social media, messages of solidarity from strangers across the country. One comment stood out. "If they can weaponize CPS like that, no one is safe." I showed Anna, and she bit her lip. Her gaze drifting to Mateo playing on the living room rug, humming along to the wooden music box melody. The symbolism wasn't lost on us. That lullaby, once a private comfort, had become the anthem for a nationwide call to accountability. But as the night deepened, our victory celebration was cut short by a sharp knock on the door. My blood ran cold. I exchanged a look with Anna and took a slow breath before answering. Outside stood two uniformed officers' badges gleaming in the porch light. My stomach dropped. "Mr. Johnson," one asked. I nodded. "We need to speak with you about a new complaint." My mind whirled. Susan Lee was back at it, or maybe CPS headquarters was making a last-ditch attempt to regain control. I swallowed, glanced at Anna and Mateo behind me, then squared my shoulders. "Yes, officers," I said, voice steady. "Come in." As I led them inside, I realized something fundamental. By choosing to expose the truth, we'd stepped into a storm with no shelter. The next move from Susan Lee or CPS could come at any moment. An emergency injunction, a raid, another attempt to take Mateo. And while I felt the strength rising inside me, the same strength that had carried me from hopelessness to this moment, I also knew that our fight had become a dangerous game of chess with real lives at stake. As the officers followed me into the kitchen, I set the dossier, the sock, and the music box in front of them, each one a testament to how far we'd come. Then I met their eyes and whispered, "I have nothing to hide." And in that charged silence, the future felt both terrifying and possible, a knife's edge waiting for our next move. When the two officers stepped into our kitchen, I felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the kind that makes your palms sweat, your brain zing with hyperfocus. They introduced themselves quietly, almost hesitantly, as if they knew our story. Detective Morales and Officer Green. They said there'd been an anonymous tip about possible misuse of evidence that our recent news release might have included confidential CPS documents. My heart thumped. I glanced at Anna, who stood behind me, clutching Mateo like a lifeline. I swallowed and forced myself to exhale slowly before answering. I volunteered every document to the Chronicle under journalistic privilege, I said. We have full chain of custody logs release waivers from CPS and legal counsel's approval. Morales nodded as he flipped through a tablet. Your attorney, Ms. Carter, provided these. But we need to verify one thing. The laptop you used to draft the releases, is it secured? I lifted my chin. Yes, in my office behind a pin lock. You're welcome to inspect it. Green trained his gaze on the small glass case containing the baby sock on the counter. And this? He asked. Exhibit A. I replied lightly, but my tone wasn't joking. Symbol of how vulnerable families can be. I've had to fight for that sock more than most people fight for their freedom. The officers exchanged a glance, respect mingled with sympathy in their eyes. Understood, Morales said. We'll take your statement, then clear this matter with the district attorney's office. We'll let you know if we have more questions. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by a sharper edge of resolve. We'd just passed another test, but the scrutiny would never really stop. That night, with the storm of law enforcement questions behind us, Anna sat on the edge of our bed and wound the wooden music box slowly, its lullaby echoing in the still darkness. Mateo slept between us, nestled in his weighted blanket, oblivious to the battle raging around him. Do you think it's over? She asked quietly, eyes reflecting lamplight and worry. I reached across to take her hand, tracing her fingers with my thumb. I don't think it ever will be, I said softly. But we've won every round so far. We have evidence, allies, and the truth on our side. She closed her eyes and leaned into me. Promise me we'll protect him, whatever it takes. I pressed a kiss to her temple. Promise. In the following days, the fallout from the Chronicle expose rippled outward. State legislators mentioned our case during hearings on CPS reform. A nonprofit watchdog organization reached out offering to support our civil suit. Social media influencers shared our story with millions of followers. Yet even as public pressure mounted, I noticed subtle signs of pushback. Anonymous posters online accusing us of attention-seeking quietly shuttered comment threads on news sites, and a few disconcerting late-night car idling in our driveway caught on our Ring camera. One evening, I found a crude drawing taped to our front gate, a simple stick figure family with a slash through the parents' arms, and the words, "Justice for the baby," scrawled underneath. My stomach knotted. Some people saw us as villains or collateral damage in a larger ideological war. The miasma of public opinion made me realize how fragile social trust can be, how in a culture that prizes law and order, the moment you challenge authority, you risk being cast as the enemy. Still, I felt my own anger morph into a quieter, more controlled determination. I spent mornings drafting the complaint against Susan Lee and CPS, laying out the counts of abuse of power, malicious prosecution, civil rights violations, and personal injury. Each claim was painstakingly detailed: the dates, the calls, the court orders. The psychological evaluations of Anna's postpartum depression triggered by forced separation, the expert testimony on Mateo's milk protein allergy. I felt like a sculptor chiseling away at a block of marble, slowly revealing the shape of justice. By noon, I would stand in our backyard with Mateo on my hip, watching him practice crawling toward a battered, stuffed giraffe and marveling at his resilience. He didn't fault anyone for the chaos. He just kept moving forward, small hands reaching for the next milestone. He was our living symbol of hope and defiance. One afternoon, I received a call from the Office of the Inspector General for Texas Health and Human Services. A formal inquiry was being launched into CPS's partnership with former employees in private investigative work. It was the first time I'd heard such a tone, measured but clearly interested. I felt a rush of vindication. Our fight had unveiled systemic rot, and now the machinery of accountability was wheeling into gear. I hung up and immediately called Anna. Her voice was a whispered cheer. "We did it," she said. Sort of. I laughed, though my throat burned. "It's not the end. It's a step." That night, Anna and I sat on the porch with Mark, sharing a six-pack of beer and replaying the major turning points. We started with the sock, then the courtroom, the music box, the town hall, Carter's dossier, and here we were watching the stars emerge, feeling a cautious optimism. Around us, cicadas droned. The neighborhood was quiet. Then Mark tapped his phone. "Someone just donated $20,000 to your GoFundMe," he said, "from an anonymous donor in New York. And look, 3 more from California and Florida." I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. "People are on our side," I said. Anna leaned her head on my shoulder. "They see what we see." But as gratitude warmed me, a darker thought flickered. When you rely on faceless supporters, you also give up some control. The money would help cover legal fees, secure private security, and guarantee we could stay put. But it also meant more scrutiny from watchdogs, more potential leaks if our files weren't airtight. I glanced at the baby sock illuminated by the porch light, then at the unopened envelope that sat on the table marked from the state office. I hadn't dared open it yet. "I have to do it," I said, standing. Anna reached for my hand. "Open it," she urged. I lifted the envelope, broke the seal, and drew out the letter. It was from the district attorney's office, preliminary notice of no criminal charges to be filed in reference to the Johnson family matter. My breath caught. No criminal charges. After months of legal harassment, CPS allegations, the fear of another takedown, they were officially dropping any pursuit of criminal proceedings against us. They would, however, continue civil litigation with Susan Lee. But the DA's decision meant they acknowledged our defenses were sound. I sank into a chair, the letter trembling in my hand. Anna knelt beside me, running her fingers over my wrist. "This is huge," she whispered. "We did it." I closed my eyes, the last tremors of fear receding. For the first time in over a year, I felt something like peace. But as the words, "no criminal charges," swam before me, my mind raced ahead. We'd won this battle, but we still had to dismantle the civil suit. From Susan Lee, clear our names definitively, and protect our family from future assaults. The sock, the music box, and every document would be part of that fight too. Above us, the sky was a deep indigo, stars scattered like pinpricks of possibility. I looked at Anna and our friends, and I thought about the countless families who lacked our resources, our allies, our platform. The gaping injustice of it all pressed on my chest, a reminder that while we'd triumphed, the system still had gaping holes. I exhaled, feeling the weight shift from my shoulders to the earth beneath me. I folded the DA's letter and tucked it into my pocket next to my phone, where Mark's last message blinked, "Tomorrow deposition with Susan Lee." My heart stuttered. I realized the next morning would bring a showdown in a sterile conference room with cameras, attorneys, and Susan facing off against me. I thought of the music box's consecrated melody and the battered sock's silent accusation, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. But then I remembered my promise to Anna, to Mateo, and to every stranger who'd believed in us. I stood and stretched the night's warmth clinging to my skin. I said quietly, "Let's get some rest. Tomorrow we stare her down." Anna nodded and squeezed my hand. We all looked out at the empty street, knowing that dawn would bring another crucible. And somewhere in that pre-dawn hush, I felt the core of my conviction harden. I would not back down. Not now, not ever.